Good evening, everyone. Tonight is the March 18th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. Start by introduction of commission members.
John Emery.
Matt Converse.
Doug Regaller.
And on the phone, Carlton.
Basmajian.
It's like Charlie's Angels. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passes. Minutes from our March 4th meeting. Any changes or additions? If not, I'll accept a motion to approve.
Move approval.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of March 4th. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carlton,
Abstain.
one abstention. Public forum. This is an area of the meeting where if someone wants to speak on an item that's not on tonight's agenda, you can come forward and speak on that. Anyone? Moving on. Item number 6, public hearing for major site development plan for 901 4th Street.
All right. So good evening, Commission. Tonight you have a public hearing for the major site plan. The proposed use of the site, which is outlined on the location and zoning map, is a commercial site, and the use is described as what we would call a basic utility. They're a communications provider, and so that type of use requires a major site development plan review. And as we noted in the staff report, that in addition to the site plan review with the P&Z and the City Council, because they're asking for a communications tower to be a tower that they can receive broadcast signals for as part of their operations, they are also seeking a special use permit from the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And the sequence that we follow in Ames is if the site plan is approved, then the Zoning Board of Adjustment just looks at the specific issue that is authorized by special use permit. So they would be looking at how the tower meets the compatibility requirements subsequent to the City Council and the P&Z approving the site plan. So tonight what you're looking at is the general proposal for the site and the buildings, the landscaping, and the access to the site. I rotated it the wrong way. So the site plan, as we see here, is fairly simplistic for the size of the site. It has a paved driveway access into a fenced enclosure area where MetroNet plans to have what they would call huts, which is really 2 facilities to house switching equipment. And then there's also the tower and a emergency generator that they would also have. The fenced in area would be a rock surface. It would not necessarily be paved. Staff is recommending that the proposed approach for the paved access, the proposed fence heights, the front yard landscaping, and the general arrangement of the site does meet our zoning standards and can be found to be compatible with the surrounding elements of the existing area and as a commercial zone. For note, they are not asking for any waivers or special exceptions to any standards related to commercial zoning on the property. There is a representative of MetroNet here if you have questions specifically about the site or the business, and I'm available for any questions about the site as well.
Why isn't it required as pavement going in?
So we have, because there's no specific parking requirement for basic utility, the thought being in most days it is an unmanned site. As they describe their business, there will be a technician that does have to visit the site to sign up new customers. It would not be an employee-driven parking requirement. So to meet the minimum of the zoning ordinance, the paved driveway does meet the minimum access requirement, and technically it does have enough space to park a vehicle between the gate and the street without blocking the sidewalk. So we're recommending that it's compliant If there was a need for additional parking spaces to be paved, they could add those within the fenced area to meet that as well. At this point, planning didn't believe that there was an outright requirement to have that. It just had to have paved access to the site.
Okay, that's what I'm asking. The driveway is going to be paved?
Yes, so where you
Okay.
see, I'm sorry,
Okay.
I didn't understand that.
That's-
So right here where you see this pattern,
Right,
it says PCC Drive, that's going to be a concrete driveway.
okay. And it's,
The applicant like to come forward and anybody have any questions for the applicant? Anybody in the audience like to speak on this tonight?
the only other thing I have, the tower is going to be made how? Is it going to be like a radio tower, or is it going to be more along the line of there should be a tower somewhere around there for the railroad, if I remember right. It's going to be along that line?
It's going to, I mean, what is it made out of?
Yes.
Yeah, so I believe we described it as a 21-inch diameter, slightly tapered tower. I believe it is a dull finish steel pole.
Okay. And there's-
And then they'll have conduit that'll be in the wires, the cabling will be enclosed in conduit on the tower or put within the tower. So it'll be similar to your typical cell phone tower look. It won't be as wide though. Cell phone towers are typically more like a 3-foot or 4-foot diameter, and this is going to be less than 2. So it'll be a little thinner, but look very much like one of those. And I believe the visual sim that was, I believe that's in this packet. I know it's, yeah. So on the last page, no, I'm not seeing it. I thought we had the. Let's see here. Yeah, so page 14 will give you a profile of the tower itself. And it'll describe a little more of the details about it. The pictures on the last page don't have the tower superimposed. They're just the surrounding conditions. I was thinking it was superimposed in there.
Ready for a motion?
Yeah. Any further discussion or questions?
Nope. Make a motion for alternative number 1. Planning and Zoning Commission can recommend that City Council approve the major site development plan for the proposed basic utility use located at 901 North 4th Street. Note construction of the tower would also require approval of the special use permit by the ZBA.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Alternative 1. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Carlton, we still have you?
No.
We just lost him. All right, so hold that vote. We will try to reconnect.
Do we need him?
Yeah.
Welcome to CenturyLink Conference. The pounder house. Again, followed by the pounder hash key.
So Carlton, I think we may have lost you right when we were asking if there was additional questions.
Okay.
Did you hear John's questions about the poll?
Yeah,
Okay,
I
so,
was ready to vote. So.
okay.
So Carlton, we have a motion and a second on alternative one. All those in
Okay.
favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0. Thanks, Carlton.
So for those that are following this item, it will be on the city council agenda next Tuesday. It's also noticed for the zoning board of adjustment next Wednesday.
All right, moving on. Item 7, public hearing for preliminary plat for Wheelock Corner Subdivision, 1499 South Dayton Avenue.
All right, so tonight you're looking at a preliminary plat for about a 16-acre parcel. It's a commercial subdivision with a new public street. It essentially mirrors the Isaac Newton Drive set up around South Dayton for this corner. This plat, let me rotate it again. So of note for this plat, you'll see on the left side of the diagram, the dashed line, that represents where the floodway from Skunk River exists. It is also an environmentally sensitive overlay in the zoning ordinance. So the applicant has completed a natural resources inventory by a qualified biologist to assess habitat conditions for the site. And they are proposing in this kind of southwest corner of the site to do grading, which is shown on the grading plan for the project. This will be a stormwater detention facility to serve multiple lots in the overall subdivision. So the conclusion from the habitat assessment and the recommendations from the biologist is that overall there is potentially some small pothole wetlands that would fall under an Army Corps national permit. They would seek permits if necessary, if they're determined to be jurisdictional by the Corps for their fill and mitigation. There's no larger wetland that's displaced by doing the project. The assessment also concluded that from the grading plan, they believe that the woodlands, which is in essence mature oak trees that are in this area, would not be affected by the grading plan. So staff is recommending that you could find that the proposed grading in the overlay does meet the requirements of being properly assessed and mitigation applied as appropriate to the environmental conditions. The other issue that's beyond a habitat question in the overlay is the floodway itself and what are the effects on flooding as a result of the activity in the floodway, which is the main reason why it's in the environmentally sensitive overlay in this condition. So they have a requirement under our floodplain ordinance to have a determination of no rise, which means that any work that happens in the floodway, there has to be a certification by a qualified engineer that there is no additional fill or displacement caused by the activity that would change the established base flood elevation for this area of the Skunk River. So what that really means is there's no way that you will receive approval or certification for any activity in the floodway that would result in any change to the flood elevation that would be the relationship to other properties in the area. This is a lot different than the floodway fringe, where we allow and actually require you to add fill to bring the site where a building is 3 feet up beyond that number. So the floodway is protected to have no change. versus the fringe, which is the rest of the property. Those sites, when they're developed, if the sites are not filled now, which they probably will not be at the time buildings are constructed, they will import fill and raise the elevation so that they can meet our minimum flood protection standard outside of the floodway. So overall, staff is recommending approval of both the lot layout and the findings for the grading being compliant with the environmental overlay restrictions. And the access to the site meets our traffic engineering expectations for the circulation route with the road through the site. No additional access will be granted to Dayton or Southeast 16th Street with this project. So with that, I know the applicant is not present tonight, and I can answer questions, and we can see if we can move this forward.
So access will be fed off of the Thiessen parking lot.
So it's not very clear on this drawing, but so that shared access with the Thiessens will continue to exist. All the other lots will have access off of this new public street that's routed through the site. So Thiessens maintains what they have. This is lined up with Isaac Newton across Dayton, and all the lot access will be off of Isaac Newton, not off of Dayton or off of Southeast 16th Street.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
One point of clarification. I noticed on attachment A, the location map versus the outline of the parcel looks different than the outline that's in the environmental assessment. Which one of those is actually correct?
Do you want to tell me which part of the environmental assessment you were looking at?
So if you look at attachment, let's see, where's the
So page
outline?
page 7.
Figure A, which is page 7.
Yeah. Okay.
So they're showing a very different parcel line on this, and I'm just curious which is the actual right one.
Give me 1 second, Carlton.
Okay.
Is he talking about the dashed line?
If you look at page 7 of the natural resources inventory, the shape of the parcel goes all the way out to the edge of the trees that are there. And I think if you look on my screen, it's cut off. Mm-hmm. It's not showing you the full extent of the floodway. And then the shape itself is somewhat different than even what we're showing on the location map here. So give me 1 second. So Carlton, my belief is the property depicted in the location map is the extent of the plat boundaries. I believe the biologist assessed additional area. The current owner owns both the outlined area that's the subject of the plat and the larger parcel that's to the west. So we will clarify that going forward, but my understanding is it's the boundary shown on the location map, which is less than what was shown in the inventory.
Current owner owns. Okay.
So I will note that, and we'll definitely make that clear for the council action form as this moves forward.
Any further questions for staff? Would anybody like to come and speak on this issue tonight?
Can I ask another question?
You bet. Yes, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The signal's a little blurry. Just real quick, this is for Kelly. When I'm looking at that figure A on the environmental assessment, that where they've outlined the oak woodlands, kind of they've highlighted it or shaded it in, and I'm trying to line that up with the parcel outline on, say, attachment B on the preliminary plat.
Okay.
Can you, when you look at the plat, can we place where is that oak woodland that they're identifying the cluster of trees that's shown there, or is that not actually shown on the map, on the parcel map, or the plat map? Sorry.
So are you asking if the green shaded area is also depicted on the preliminary plat exhibits?
Yes. Yes.
It is not outlined on essentially the attachment B. You can see the individual trees are identified as existing conditions, but you're right, there's no boundary that matches that shape that is also shown on the plat. So the recommendations were to have grading stay out of the drip line of the mature oak trees to the extent possible. And that's what we were focused on, was on sheet C2.1, which is page 8, the grading plan, that it was reflecting that recommendation from the inventory study.
Okay.
Is there a specific issue that you think we have to address? Is there any other questions, Carlton?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't hear. I'm toggling between the video and you so I can hear everything. Well, I asked about that primarily because in the environmental assessment, there is a mention of the potential significance of that oak stand. And I wanted to clarify whether it would be kind of preserved, if there was any indication of whether that oak stand would be preserved, or where it actually fit on this plat map. I mean, they didn't highlight it extensively, but whoever wrote this did note that those trees persist prior to the 1930s. So that's a relatively significant set of a small patch of woodlands. And that was my kind of where I was going with that question.
So can I repeat that to say, are you asking, is there any actual protection measure for those?
Yeah, for that little, yeah. So, because on page, let me find where they mention it, but the consultant writes about it, and they note, I think it's on page 3, in the central portion of the investigation area, just to the west of the agricultural field, remnant oak woodland is present that has persisted since prior to the 1930s. And he goes on to say they provide some elevated habitat and ecological value. And of course, trees that old are not that easy to come by.
Yeah, and they're rather large.
I was wondering if there's some efforts or some note in there in this, like with the staff discussions with the applicant, of potentially preserving that stand of trees as part of the development.
So I believe they don't intend to disturb it, but I don't believe we have a mechanism such as an easement saying that it would be preserved. So that is something that, if you want to clarify, that could be part of a motion to have the intent to preserve clarified with the applicant.
Okay.
Earlier on, there was some other features that were kind of depicted in that general area, and the applicant did pull those out after we continued to look at that. So once those were removed, I think staff just kind of moved on from detailing that out any further. So if there is a concern, we can definitely ask the applicant to clarify intent to preserve beyond the grading plan. Is there any other questions, Carlton?
Well, not at the moment. I I might have a couple more in a minute, but go ahead and I'll think about it.
Did we take public comment yet?
Yeah. Would anybody in the audience like to speak on this tonight?
I just have a question.
Can you come up to the mic?
Come up here, or please, and sign in. Is there a thing?
They're at the lectern.
Oh, here we are. Just one question. So just for clarification, so the motion is to change this into a commercial property? Is that what the motion was initially?
The recommendation is to approve its subdivision into commercial lots, yes,
Okay,
with the construction of a new public street.
okay. And has there been anybody apply or any businesses come forward, or is it just for purpose of sale currently?
At this point in time, all I have is the proposed lots. We do not have a pending application for the development of any of those lots at this time.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And if you could turn that sheet into Lori.
I will, yeah.
Okay.
Just step back here.
Anyone else? Any further discussion for staff or on the issue?
But the street is going in there. The street addition is going in there.
Isaac Newton, yes.
So there has to be some kind of plans around that street, or why is that street going in?
Well, the developer wants to be able to market multiple lots. So to create those lots, this is the mechanism that they have to do that. So as a subdivision, they have to, when they final plat, they'll have to financially secure the construction of the street within 3 years of final plat or construct it up front. We wouldn't allow construction on a lot without a complete street being built. So they basically, if this goes through, they'll have a year to final plat and have up to 3 years then to put the improvements in. And the sooner they build, the sooner they would have to put the improvements in. So it's the same process as a residential subdivision. You're creating the lots, putting the infrastructure in, and you're hoping to sell the lots.
And the retention pond is going to just be west of that entrance.
It's gonna be pretty far away from the entrance. You're talking about up in this area?
Right.
Yeah.
Anything else on the issue? Any other comments? Anybody care to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended the City Council approve the preliminary plat for the Wheelock Corner subdivision, subject to approval of the floodplain permit by the City of Ames and other affected agencies. And if we'd also add some clarification on the trees per Carlton's comments.
Okay.
Carlton, did you hear any of that?
I did not. I'm fading in and out.
So I'll
Sorry.
I'll repeat it, Carlton. I think I'm closest to the mic. So the motion was by Doug to approve and add a condition that the applicant clarify preserving the oak woodlands that were identified in the inventory.
Okay. I was going to suggest that. So I agree with that completely.
So we have a motion.
We have a second?
I'll second it. It's been moved and seconded. Alternative one with the rider to preserve the tree inventory.
At this point, we'll work with the applicant to
Okay.
figure out what preservation means or what their intent was to do with that. And then
Okay.
we'll deal with that specifically in the council action form as part of the recommendation.
All those in favor of the motion as read, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Carlton, we're voting.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. Are you voting approve or deny?
I'm voting yes, aye,
Okay.
to support the motion.
We can't see you, so
Sorry.
it's hard to gauge what's going on.
Yeah, I hear like about half of what y'all are saying, so I'm trying to like not vote at the wrong time.
Okay, so this item,
Motion passes.
motion passed 4-0. It will move to the city council in April for consideration of the preliminary plat. Okay.
All right, item number 8, zoning text amendment for industrial parking rates.
So this is brought forward by staff. This was identified as something that we wanted to look at a couple years back in our work plan. So we're proposing one of two options to reduce the parking requirement for large manufacturing facilities. As we described here, we think it's appropriate that smaller facilities, they generally still need the kind of parking that we're talking about, but as you scale up, you generally don't need as much parking as our basic rate would require. We're proposing two ways to look at that. If you want staff to have a lot of discretion, that is an option in number 1. And that would still require the applicant to show how parking could be built on the lot. Option 2 would just say our parking requirement is lowered. There's no expectation you would show us how future parking would be added if you were to add square footage for the manufacturing process. Staff is okay with either way. We could work with either. So we just want to move it forward as a way to work with future manufacturing businesses. So we're looking for a recommendation, either option A or option B. I'm sorry, option 1 or option 2.
And what happens if we don't change it?
Then they would have to build extra parking. So if we do nothing, they would just follow the current parking rate.
Can I ask a question here?
Yes, you may.
Just curious how y'all came up with the numbers you did on both options. Was that is this based on a precedent in other places, or where are those two numbers coming from in terms of the 40% reduction or the 1 per 700 square foot standard?
So I think, so my experience with industrial parking rates is there's a lot of different ways to do it. For example, Des Moines does it based on projected employees. I personally prefer not to use employees because I have no way of verifying or understanding really what someone's business is in any one year. I prefer to have an objective standard. So I did not take the approach of saying it's 1 parking space per employee on the largest shift, which is what some zoning ordinances say. The 40% reduction, the only business that this has come up as a discussion in since I've been here, and one reason why we brought it up was Barilla's expansion 2 years ago. They meet the current parking requirement. We talked about whether they really needed that parking or not, and they went ahead and built it at that time when they did their additions out there. But I went back and looked at if we had, how would this have worked if we had reduced it by 40%, and how that would have fit with their addition, and it fit their needs. If they had this parking rate, they probably would have built less parking than we required if it was an option. So I kind of sized it to their issue. So that's not a perfect way to look at it, but that's one thing we looked at. And then the employees per square foot is a highly variable factor depending on industry. So we have some information that would say maybe you would plan on 1 job per 750 square feet of industrial or manufacturing square footage. So the 1 per 700 is fairly similar to that. I mean, I'm even willing to probably go a little bit less than 40%, mean a greater reduction than 40%. But I felt like this was a start down that direction, not knowing exactly what we're talking about. They're pretty highly variable. I still have the ability, in addition, to reduce it by 10% for landscaping. So if someone just didn't want to build 10% of their parking and they wanted to landscape it instead, I have the authority to waive that. So you could almost get to 50% less than today through both of these factors. That's where I was coming from. I don't think there's a perfect answer in any way to guessing how a manufacturing plant's employee rate's going to really work.
Right. One follow-up to that. So would, say like a warehouse or a distribution facility or a server farm fall under this? Would that typically be under one of these zoning categories?
So a warehouse has its own rate and it's less. I believe thought we quoted that in here. A warehouse is one space per 5,000 square feet.
Oh, you did. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you did say that.
Yes.
So think of some other, I mean, what other kinds of facilities might fall in that category that might not have might have a lot of square footage, but not many people?
So a server farm's not in our zoning code. So I would have the leeway of applying the most applicable rate. And I don't know what I would conclude today because I'd have never been asked if someone could build a server farm in Ames. But
yeah, that makes sense. I was just thinking of, the facilities in Altoona, these,
yeah, I did not go and
square feet with 15
specifically
people
look.
inside them at any one point. They probably don't need much parking.
I'm trying to think. I think I did actually look at Altoona's because that came to mind, and they use employees as their parking rate. So Des Moines and Altoona, the two I looked at that have we knew about the server farm. So they use employees, not square footage.
My question is, why do we need the change?
I think in general, it's viewed as an unnecessary expense if you have to build parking area that you're not going to use.
Well, and
That was the conversation with Barilla they built it. They did what they needed to do. In their mind, they probably have extra parking because they don't have that many employees on site.
And I would say as you look towards the future, as technology continues to evolve and automation continues to occur, I mean, your manufacturers are probably going to require less human.
I mean, it's conceivable. There's fully automated warehouses, so you could have hundreds of thousands of square feet without a single person in the building nowadays. And we would still require parking for that. I mean, you could run a distribution center on basically no people because it's fully automated. And I did not write a standard. Again, if we went to employees, then that would be a totally different function of things. So this is a step towards reducing it, but it doesn't fully embrace the fully automated future.
Yeah, but I think the flexibility is good.
Yeah. So I think that's where we're headed. We're trying to say we want to encourage this development pattern and not add unnecessary site development expectations. If they want more, they're free to build it. And our parking standards are generally constructed to make sure you're not overburdening the roadway system or some adjacent property. Well, in the manufacturing areas, that doesn't seem to be a real prime concern. Most sites are fairly large. There isn't parking on public streets in the first place. So that's where we were coming from, thinking we could accommodate maybe a little more square footage with less parking.
Could Barilla come to us and say, hey, we're not going to need all this parking, and we could do a variance?
We don't grant variances for preferences. So they would not be able to get a variance because they wouldn't be able to prove they have an economic hardship from constructing the spaces. So our bar of waiving a standard is extremely high. You would have to prove an economic hardship, and that would be basically impossible on a site like Barilla.
But could they bring it to the commission to change it, or to what do I want?
There's no way to waive standards in the code right now. So I didn't have Barilla, again, they would have built less parking if I had permission to do that. I don't have any tools to give them as a way to reduce parking. So,
But what I'm trying to say, could they come to us and we could have done it,
no,
or the city council?
only if you change an ordinance, which is what this is doing. So there's no, we didn't propose some kind of parking exception process where the zoning board of adjustment could do it on a case-by-case basis. I'm pretty comfortable that this is not a case-by-case situation. It's probably generally applicable rather than a one-off. And even if that was the case, we'd have to establish parameters that they could ask for this exception because there's no way to ask for it now.
Anything else for Kelly? Anybody in the audience like to speak on this tonight? I'm getting there.
Kelly, could I ask another question?
Yep, go ahead, Carlton.
Option 2 versus, no, okay, never mind. You prefer option 2. Okay. Is that true? Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
So I think it's pretty.
The rationale there?
Our rationale is it's pretty straightforward. I'm going to I can't imagine a situation where I wouldn't agree to exercise my discretion as described in option 1. If your floor plan shows things with offices in it, I'm not giving you the manufacturing rate anyways. So I felt that if somebody wants a precaution, option 1 is there. If we're all comfortable that the rate could just be lowered, and I am comfortable with that, we should pick option 2. So it's just administrative. But if there's a question about comfort, then you should pick option 1, where at least I have some judgment about whether it's granted or not. And if you don't like my decision, you have to, on approval of a permit, you have to appeal it to the city council. That's only happened once in 7 years, maybe only once in 15 years. So that doesn't really happen.
So I just wonder, would it be advisable, option 2 I'm not uncomfortable with, but to actually sort of lower that standard even further, given that, the trend is toward greater automation, surely, in terms of manufacturing. And maybe 700 isn't, but it feels like a sort of a gradual shift as opposed to something a little more aggressive. I'm just curious. I'm asking, if you talked about 1 per 1,000, let's say, square feet rather than 1 per 700.
I'm probably comfortable going anywhere between 700 and 1,000. Again, I didn't investigate this in great detail to pick a really low reduction, but if that was the direction, I'm willing to go lower than 700.
Anything further? Is there a motion on item number 8?
Well, I'll go ahead and make a motion that Planning and Zoning Commission recommend approval of alternative 2, and recommend that the city council, option 2, industrial service manufacturing and production, resource production and extraction, 1 space per 500 square foot plus 1 space per company vehicle for manufactured uses exceeding 50,000 square feet, be 1 space per, I'm okay with 1,000 square feet if we go up to that. So I guess.
You're okay with the new option, reducing it to 1 per 1,000?
Yes, yeah.
So that would be actually alternative 3.
Oh.
So alternative 3 is you would make an alternative language suggestion.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
So the motion on the table, Carlton, was alternative 3 to reduce the parking rate to 1 per 1,000 for manufacturing uses exceeding 50,000 square feet.
Okay.
All right, Doug?
Yeah.
I would support that.
So that is
So
second.
I think that's, I'll second it. Sorry.
It's been moved and seconded. Option 3, 1 space per 1,000 square feet for manufacturing uses exceeding 50,000 square feet. All those in favor of this motion signify by saying aye.
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 Nay.
Aye for nay.
3-1.
3-1.
Okay, so we will move this forward to council sometime this spring with final language for them. Carlton seconded.
This is an extra one of these. Moving on, item number 9, commission comments. Carlton, you got anything?
Well, this is my last meeting as a member of this commission, and so I should say it's been 6 years, which is kind of hard to believe. It's been interesting. I've learned a lot, and I want to extend my gratitude to the staff, especially to Kelly. I think you all do a fantastic job of setting this up for us, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you guys and to work with you on this. And I really, I can't say it enough. I really do appreciate the work that you all do, and I appreciate the opportunity to have gotten to know you and hang out together occasionally on a Wednesday evening.
I will echo what Carlton said there. This is also my last evening meeting here. Staff, terrific. This has been interesting and educational. Great seeing how Ames works from this side of the process. So thank you. And working with everybody on the commission over the last 6 years has been terrific. So
Well, thank you, guys.
Yeah, I've enjoyed working with you guys for the most part. Except when you don't agree with me. So.
staff comments, Kelly?
Just very quickly, thank you for accommodating us tonight, Carlton, to be able to move this forward. It's obviously very strange times. City Hall is working through a lot of questions. City Council will be going through a similar exercise next week. How the Planning and Zoning Commission works after tonight, stay tuned. I don't know where we're going, but it's going to be probably not business as usual for a few months. With that said, I want to thank you, Matt and Carlton, again for your service. Again, very, very helpful opinions and discussion, obviously, over the last 6 years on a variety of topics. The other thing I'll just give you a heads up on as a commission, we do have 2 new appointees. They will be part of your next meeting. We're going to need a new chair. We'll have 2 new people. We'll give them some introductions, but we'll obviously have a new commission to get familiar with at that time. The other item is, because of the conditions we are experiencing and the isolation and separation that we're practicing all as a society, Ames Plan 2040 is going to be suspended for a couple of months. So council is choosing not to work on that. It's hard to do public engagement. It's hard to ask for extra meetings and not have the public be participating. So there will be a delay moving forward. We don't have a new schedule for you, but it is going to be suspended for at least a couple of months while we work on other issues about how to work in public hearing environments and public meetings.
So you're going, today was not a contentious meeting, but like the meeting we had for Lincoln Way, we had a lot of people there. How are we going to do that?
I will tell you how we solve for city council, and then we will apply it to you and the zoning board of adjustment and to other boards and commissions. So obviously city council covers contentious things very often. We'll be working through that for next week.
Because as Carlton showed, that the phone isn't always.
This won't be how we go forward. We'll have a better system, assuming that we need it to, if we need to have teleconference or we need to split up boards partially here, partially not here. However, we're going to do that. It won't be this next time. So again, thank you very much for putting up with this tonight. We will have a better system in place for the future.
It worked.
Yeah.
We got through it.
Yep.
But thankfully it was not a hefty lift for tonight.
Fields. All right. Well, with that, we're adjourned.
All right.